Introduction. In 1859, a British naturalist named Charles Darwin published a book that was to set the scientific community on fire and change the course of history. In his book, The Origin of Species, Darwin proposed a theory he called natural selection. According to Darwin, living organisms pass on countless traits to their offspring with small and random variations. Those offspring that live long enough to reproduce tend to have inherited traits that make them better able to compete for limited resources and better suited to their specific environment. In other words, only the fittest organisms survive. Darwin theorized that this survival of the fittest might explain how various species change and diverge, evolve and die out. He further surmised that life on Earth might have begun as a single-celled organism and evolved over eons of time to invertebrates, then reptiles, and eventually large mammals, including humans. From the start, the theory offended Orthodox Christians who believed God had created every living thing, and that, as the book of Genesis states, they brought forth after their kind. Christians rejected the idea that man evolved from lower life forms. Most scientists wrote them off as fundamentalists and religious crackpots. But in the latter half of the 20th century, more and more reputable experts began to come forward and express doubts about Darwin's theory. Various movements, including creation science and intelligent design, arose and continue to battle evolution to this day. A press release by the Discovery Institute of Seattle, Washington, dated February 8, 2007, made this statement. More scientists than ever before are now standing up and saying that it is time to rethink Darwin's theory of evolution in light of new scientific evidence that shows the theory is inadequate, said John West, Associate Director of the Center for Science and Culture. Darwinists are busy making up holidays to turn Charles Darwin into a saint, even as the evidence supporting his theory crumbles and more scientific challenges to it emerge. The press release announces the publishing of a petition by over 5,000 scientists who have dissented from Darwinism. Another organization, Physicians and Surgeons for Scientific Integrity, proclaims on its website, "Educating the public on DME, Darwinian macroevolution, is very important as the public is told through a troubling lack of integrity in the science community that the consensus of scientists is that DME is a fact, which is far from the truth. Sadly, the strong scientific evidence challenging DME has been suppressed by the very disciplines that should support following the evidence where it leads. As physicians and surgeons, many of whom have performed postdoctoral work in biology, we can assure you that the amazing complexity we observe daily in our various areas of practice is not the product of random natural processes." The group promotes its own list of evolution skeptics, 892 at the time of this writing, August 28, 2007, which is downloadable from its website at www.doctorsdoubtingdarwin.com. Unfortunately, the media rarely gives these opposing viewpoints much attention, and science textbooks and professors teach evolution as if it is a proven fact. Zoologist Richard Dawkins said, "It is absolutely safe to say that if you meet somebody who claims not to believe in evolution, that person is ignorant, stupid, or insane, or wicked, but I'd rather not consider that." And biologist Ernest Mayr said, "Evolution is so clearly a fact that you need to be committed to something like a belief in the supernatural if you are at all in disagreement with evolution. It is a fact and we don't need to prove it anymore." But as you will see, nothing could be further from the truth. Yet because of attitudes like these, few people realize that Darwinism still raises many unanswered questions. Numerous respected experts have gone on record to say that evolution, as it is currently defined, is impossible. This book attempts to bring to light just a sampling of the problems with the theory of evolution. I hope that you will take the time to consider the other side of the issue with an open heart and an open mind. This is not a book about science against religion. Christianity has no quarrel with science. Instead, I hope to demonstrate that the theory of evolution itself is in conflict with science, and that truly scientific discoveries are entirely compatible with the Bible. I will also show how theistic evolution, the view that God created the world through evolutionary processes, is inconsistent with the concept of a loving, caring God. As Douglas Fukuyama explains in his 1983 book Science on Trial, fundamentalist Christians reject the concept of theistic evolution, which they find theologically repugnant. The Creator of whom they conceive could not have used such cruel, wasteful processes as natural selection and extinction to achieve its ends. How to use this book. This guide is comprised primarily of quotes from reputable scientists and other experts knowledgeable about the subject of evolution. It is not intended to be read cover to cover, although you certainly may do so. The quotes are organized into a variety of pertinent sections so you can find them quickly and easily. The book is designed to be a valuable reference tool, and it is meant as a companion to other materials you might research on the topic in the future. I have highlighted the quotes that I think are the most damning to the theory of evolution. You'll notice that, ironically, many of them come from evolutionists. So, if you're pressed for time, or just plain lazy, you can skip to the shaded areas and still have a pretty good idea of what each chapter has to offer. This book is different from others you might read on the creation-evolution debate. Most quote experts on one side or the other and then interpret the quotes for the reader. I have chosen not to do that for two reasons. First, for the sake of simplicity and brevity. But more importantly, I want you to think through the more difficult passages and draw your own conclusion. Not every quote's significance is readily apparent or easily understood. It may sometimes be necessary to reread many of them and ask yourself, what is the writer really saying here? And how does it pertain to the argument against evolution? I have not always spelled things out for you, and I in fact disagree with the views of some of the writers quoted. As well, the questions at the end of each chapter are meant to spark philosophical discussion and debate. What this book is not. To make a complete case against the theory of evolution is beyond the scope of this work. I've included a handy resource list at the back if you wish to find out more on the creation-evolution controversy. Also, this guide cannot prove the existence of a divine creator. Theologians have been attempting to do that for centuries. It would take a much smarter man than I to prove God exists. That, I freely acknowledge, must be accepted on faith, although not blind faith. My intention in writing this book was to do what a good defense lawyer does in a court of law, to create reasonable doubt. I firmly believe that if evolution were put on trial, it would lose strictly on the basis of the scientific evidence. So often the evidence against evolution is not presented in public schools or the media. The general public is left with the impression that evolution is a fact on par with the law of gravity. I hope to show that much debate still rages in the scientific community about the logistics of evolution, and the conclusions are by no means absolute. Also, this is not a book of solutions. Frankly, it will probably raise more questions than it answers. My goal is to get you to question evolution rather than to accept it on the word of a few dogmatic scientists. As previously mentioned, at the end of each section I've listed some questions for you to ponder. There are no right or wrong answers. Please take a moment to ask yourself these questions, think critically, and decide for yourself what you will choose to believe about the theory of evolution. A note to skeptics. Some critics of this compendium will say that the quotes are taken out of context and don't accurately represent the writer's original intent. As well, it could be said that in a few cases the scientists speak about issues that are beyond their particular field of expertise. Also, I'm sure it will be noted by a few of the more skeptical readers that several of these quotes are decades old. While this is true, it serves a valuable purpose. It demonstrates just how long ago many of the evidences for evolution were discredited. I marvel that some of them are still taught as fact, in some instances over a century later. Skeptics might concede that while there is a debate over the various mechanisms that cause evolution, no real scientist disputes evolution actually took place. They could ask, since Christians often disagree with each other on certain doctrines, pitting Catholic against Protestant, Baptist against Methodist, does that prove Jesus never existed or invalidate Christianity? All of these may or may not be fair points. I have tried to remain objective and let the quotes speak for themselves, except at the end where I will give my conclusions. I also must note that I have done my best to check the context of these quotes. In a few cases where a quote I intended to use appeared to misrepresent the author's true thoughts about evolution, or when I discovered that it indeed did so, I declined to include it in the book. I acknowledge that many or even most of the scientists quoted here remain strong proponents of evolution. Some of them are the most influential minds in evolutionary theory past and present. I can only speculate as to why they continue in their faith, and a few of the possible reasons may be found in Chapter 18. Let it be said as well that hundreds of other quotes could easily be supplied to support the case made in each chapter. But as this project grew, I found myself having to drastically limit the number of quotes for both space and fear of boring you, the reader, by belaboring a particular point. Why I wrote this book. First and foremost, I intend to shatter the myth that the theory of evolution is a fact. Secondly, I'd like to do serious damage to the notion that evolution is a credible and satisfactory explanation for the development of life on planet Earth. And finally, I hope to make a small dent in the image of the always honest and objective scientist. This book is not anti-science, but it is against bad science. I will show that evolution is bad science. In the end, I predict the discerning reader will come away with a new perspective that scientists are human and as such are flawed, capable of mistakes, and can sometimes be very, very wrong. You might even conclude that maybe, just maybe, they are wrong about evolution. Ultimately, the following quote sums up my reasoning for writing this book. As we know, there is a great divergence of opinion among biologists, not only about the causes of evolution, but even about the actual process. This divergence exists because the evidence is unsatisfactory and does not permit any certain conclusions. It is therefore right and proper to draw the attention of the non-scientific public to the disagreements about evolution. W.R. Thompson, Director of the Commonwealth Institute of Biological Control, in the introduction to the centennial edition of Darwin's Origin of Species.